Select Characters, where gaming meets analysis.
Hello and welcome to the 21st episode of the Select Characters podcast. I'm Sam Yates. I will be your host. Enrique Cancel, unfortunately, will not be here this week. He is on that grind like you read about. And in order to help his problem and other problems for other people just like yourselves, we are forming a company today, and that company is called Experience Incorporated. How many times have you heard that I can't get this position because I don't have the experience, and I can't get the experience without the position? Experience Incorporated is here to help, where we do everything and nothing particularly well. Joining me here in order to get 5 years of experience in the Chief of Training Operations, I have Ryan Dildine. How are you?
Hey, how's it going? I'm doing good. Hanging in there.
Good. Glad to hear it. And let's see, over here, getting experience in running Experience Incorporated in order to eventually apply, Christopher Anderson. What's up?
I'm working on a nice little pyramid scheme here, so everything's all rosy.
Yeah, it's like, post-college, basically. So, we have the guy who does the job to get experience, and then the guy who needs experience managing the job.
Well, it doesn't matter where you are on the corporate ladder, you all have crushing student debt. So
why not more?
Exactly. In for a penny, in for a pound.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about what we've been playing. And another great week for video games has passed, and let's talk about what we've been playing. Let's start with you, Chris.
It's been a very, very good game week, actually. We decided to play Borderlands 2 for the Game Club, which you can see in the video that's going to be uploaded on Thursday. And because I didn't want to re-spoil myself for the rest of the story, I want to play through the game with you guys, like start anew and stuff. I bought Borderlands a pre-sequel and the Season Pass, which includes the Handsome Jack Doppelganger pack, so you can play as a Handsome Jack's doppelganger or body double. And it's the exact same game, the exact same gunplay, the exact same principle, but it's basically Borderlands Australia, because it's made by 2K Australia, so there's a lot of Australian accents in that game, and it's on the moon of Pandora, and on the Hyperion spaceship that you see looming over you wherever you go in Borderlands 2. It is a sequel to Borderlands 2, but the story is a prequel, and it sort of gives you the story of Handsome Jack and his fall, basically, and it is still great. It's hilarious. Because I know people in Australia, I'm sort of familiar with the lingo, so a lot of the jokes are not lost on me.
Yeah.
But it is very, very Australian.
That's awesome, man. I had a great time playing Borderlands 2, so if that's just more of that, then no problems, right?
Yeah, and then there's a couple of new mechanics in there. You've got laser weapons, and they have an elemental effect chance that is higher if you shoot them in an atmosphere. And you've got a mechanic called Oz kits, which are oxygen kits, because there's no oxygen on the moon.
Oh, right, yeah.
And you can use that in fights. Like it's a thing that counts down constantly as you're out and about on the surface of the moon. But enemies have that mechanic as well, and you can you can shoot their masks so they choke to death, for instance, or you can freeze them and kick them, and they burst into 1,000 little pieces and float off. It is pretty good. It's just more Borderlands 2.
That sounds cool. Is it any kind of like a pain to manage how much oxygen you have, or you just generally always have enough?
Yeah, enemies drop oxygen flasks if you kill them as well. So it never really is a problem. Maybe like the first hour or two until you get a better Oz kit, and then never really think about it anymore.
Nice.
It's a neat little mechanic, but ultimately it's inconsequential. But it's fun. It's fun.
Awesome. Anything else?
Like I had all these ideas, like all these games I wanted to talk about. Now I've forgotten them all.
You want Ryan to go and you can think about it?
Nah, I played Borderlands pre-sequel the most, so I'm going to stick with that one.
All right, solid. All right, Ryan, what you been playing, man?
It was another busy week for me. Like Chris said, played Borderlands, and that was really fun. I played outside of that, I pretty much played Counter-Strike and had some very frustrating matches. Had several levers within a very short amount of time in different games, so kind of sucked. But we ended up getting a win on our last game, so I mean, I guess that makes up for it.
That's good.
It makes the victory that much sweeter if you're disadvantaged to begin with, yet somehow still manage to win.
Yep.
Don't you get more points too, like ranking points theoretically? I know that nobody knows how that system works, but I think when you're...
Oh, you mean when somebody leaves and you...
Yeah, when you're 4 on 5?
I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay, well that's...
I should hope so.
I mean, everything about that ranking system is rumor mill, but what I've heard is that when you win a round, you get a certain amount of the ranking points from the other team. So if you're only spreading that batch 4 ways instead of 5, that you get more.
Oh, that may be true.
Okay.
But yeah, that's pretty much all I played this week. Again, it's busy time of the year.
Yeah, I understand. As for myself, I finished the Phantom Pain, so that's pretty cool.
Nice.
It's been a while since I actually finished a video game. So that felt pretty good. I still think that game's phenomenal. I'd put it on some kind of list. If you were making a list of very, very important video games, I would put that one on it.
Yeah, we had a bit of a conversation about this last week. Like, the review for this game that we did will be up by the time that you're listening to this podcast. So go over to YouTube and check out Sam's thoughts.
Yeah, that's right. And also got to play some Super Mario Maker, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
The game's a lot of fun. It really is. It's basically what it says on the box, but until you actually sit down and play it, I mean, the magic is definitely there. And a lot of those levels are very, very hard. And it's intense. Mario, I don't remember Mario controlling quite like he does, at least in the very original one, and I was having trouble with it, but then I realized I was trying to use the analog stick on the gamepad instead of the D-pad. Switched the D-pad, and all of a sudden it was like riding a bike. So that game is a ton of fun, man. It's got modes in it, like where you have 100 Marios and you have to beat online levels that other people have made.
Oh, like 100 lives, basically.
Yep, exactly. And I think the one that me and my brother were trying to do was beat 16 levels, and it was just so difficult. Like, the bulk of the levels that people are making right now are just designed to be as frustrating as possible.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's still a good time, though. And it's still fun. And even though they kind of put in those gotcha moments, it's still great.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that game. Apparently, it's very easy and intuitive to make levels.
Yep, absolutely is. And the timer thing is weird. I think my brother was waiting to like get more tools or something. Like, it doesn't just give them all to you.
Yeah, it's time gated, but you can just set your clock or your calendar to a few days in advance, and you'll just get the stuff by then.
I should have suggested that to him. Didn't think about it. That was about it. I surfed around a little bit, and if any of the listeners can help me here, I'm trying to find a good Mahjong game for the computer, because I sort of had a flashback, and I was like, man, I'd like to kind of get better or learn to play Mahjong again. And there's a lot of simulation programs and stuff like that, and I want something which I know has to exist. Like, I want to learn to play Mahjong, but I also want it to have like a wacky top layer. So if anybody knows any kind of game like that, or if you can just recommend a good Mahjong trainer, that'd be awesome.
That did not go how I thought it would go.
No? Where did you think it was going?
Well, not Mahjong. That's a game I hardly ever hear anyone talk about.
Yeah, we used to play it back home, and it was cool because you have the set with all the awesome clacky tiles, so it's got a little bit of dexterity to it too, like setting up the game and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess I'm planning to go home for Christmas, so before I go, I kind of want to brush up a little bit.
Right.
But, I mean, I would also like to play something with like some bombastic overlayer to the actual Mahjong training, so... Maybe
search the App Store or the Google Play Store or something.
Yeah.
There's probably someone out there, some developer with way too much time on his hands thinking like, yes, the world needs this.
Right.
Explosive Mahjong.
Yeah, like Mortal Kombat Mahjong tournament or something.
Extreme Mahjong.
That's what I want. Cool. So you guys want to move on and talk about some topics?
Super Mahjong Brothers.
Let's do it.
I'd play that. Super Mahjong Maker.
Yes. As you all know, I'm really into stories in games. Like, the narrative is the most important thing that draws me to most games I play. But sometimes I have a bit of difficulty trying to figure out why I'm getting so invested in a story. And I thought we could talk about that. What makes you invested in a story?
I think it's when... See, I picked this topic, I said it was good because I was surprised at how actually impacted I was by parts of the Phantom Pain story.
Right.
And that's not something that usually happens to me. And even, I guess the final ending didn't really do it to me, but there's like a part in the middle there that really got me. And I was thinking on it, and I was like, well, what causes me to be more invested in that than in other things? And I think it's when the story itself ties very tightly to what you're doing in the gameplay. And I can't really get more specific than that, but I mean, like, the character of Quiet, her storyline is really great, And I think that part of the reason it impacted me so much was because I was using her basically on every mission.
Yeah, you sort of gotten used to her, which automatically means that you start to get more invested in her fate, as it were.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And because she was tied so closely to the mechanics, and I was like really enjoying having her around and being a part of my team, that her storyline became really impactful to me. Right. And I think that's the difference between that particular story and others where I'm maybe not invested as much.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I haven't known you to be very invested in stories at all, because you usually come for the mechanics, and the mechanics alone are what keep you playing a game. So it's good to hear that a character impacted you as much as Quiet did.
Yeah, I think, and it's got to be that, because I started relating it backwards, like thinking about The Witcher in particular, because that's the other sort of big, large story game that I've played this year.
Yeah.
And that one, the story didn't really grab me as much.
Huh. I was very grasped by this story, but that's because the characters felt so real, for lack of a better term. I mean, it's a fantasy game, obviously, and there's like fantasy rules and principles in that story, but the characters felt very real and human and down to earth to me, and I thought that Geralt was a very interesting character to begin with. Especially now that I've read some of the books, I sort of understand the character better, and he feels more real to me as a result of that.
Yeah, they did a good job with the characters in The Witcher. And what I think it is there's it's like a time bomb. Like if I wear out on the mechanics before I get to the end of the story, then the story itself isn't enough to compel me forward and move me all the way to the end of it.
I agree with that. I'm the same way.
I'm a bit different, really. For instance, BioShock Infinite, I thought it was a pretty boring shooter. It's bog standard. The gunplay is adequate at best. And I was sort of done with it halfway through the story, but I kept playing it for the story. The story was so ludicrously good that I didn't really care that the mechanics were just adequate, very generic.
Yeah, I guess you do have to kind of sort of stack it against the power of those two things against each other. Because if the story's strong enough, it'll pull you through some bad mechanics and vice versa.
Yeah, we talked about this before, haven't we? Actually,
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I remember talking about it when I was playing Spec Ops: The Line, because I thought that story was very good, even though I have this weird thing where I get through a lot of things and then I don't stick it for the end. Like, I read books until the last 2 chapters, or I watch a movie until the last 20 minutes. I did that with Spec Ops: The Line. Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why. I just get to that point and I'm like, eh. And I felt that way with Spec Ops: The Line. I was like, the story's been carrying the mechanics this far. And then I just got to a point where I was like, other things are more interesting to me now. I'm going to go do that. I will go finish that game. But yeah, I don't know. It's, I used to be kind of like you, Chris, where I was really into stories. And that's what I look for most in a game. And now I'd say in the last 2 years, I've really gone towards mechanically sound games. Just, I guess my tastes have just changed over the past couple of years. But yeah, it's like now I play games that have pretty much no story, like Counter-Strike and DayZ. I just hop in, play, and then hop out. Rocket League is another one that I consistently play, and there's no story to it. And I don't think a game has really hooked me with a story since The Walking Dead, the first one. I never finished the second series.
Well, you could argue that DayZ still has a story, but it's a story that you yourself write, which is a whole different kind of conversation, I guess.
Yeah. I enjoy that. But as far as like a frame narrative, I don't know. I just kind of fell out of interest. I even tried it with Grand Theft Auto 5 and couldn't get into it.
Wow.
Here's a question. When you reach that point, which we've sort of established, where like going through more of the gameplay is just so much of a slog that you don't think that whatever story you're going to get is worth it, right? That's kind of the drop-off point. Mm-hmm. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Do you then go to something like YouTube where you can get the story without the gameplay, or do you drop the game altogether?
I just drop it. I think to myself, I have so much little of this left that I just think to myself, I'll finish it up on a boring afternoon or something.
And then it just never comes around. It just
never comes.
No, I don't really do that. If I'm invested in a story after a couple of hours, I want to know how it ends. Like, to me, the story is the game, as it were. It's the major draw. And the entire game, no matter, like, say that I've played this is a better example. I played Dragon Age Inquisition the entire way through, and I was sort of done with the sort of fake MMO mechanics in that game. It was an MMO without basically being an MMO.
Yeah.
But I saw it through for the story because that was what drew me in. And for all intents and purposes, I wanted to see resolution because that could make me walk away from the game thinking, yeah, those were hours well spent. I got something out of that was satisfying. Turns out it wasn't really satisfying, but it's besides the point. But I usually play games until the end of the story.
Has that ever been like a danger for you? Because the payoff, like you're slogging through the mechanics to get to the story payoff, and the story payoff maybe wasn't so good. Does that ever make you feel like bad at the end of a game?
Well, then at least I know what happens at the end.
Yeah, I guess so.
Better to know than not know, like regardless of the cost.
Yeah, exactly. Like the story arc is completed, and that is good enough for me. Like if it was a great end to the arc, then absolutely fantastic. If it wasn't, it's a bummer. But at least there was resolution of some sort.
I have to be interested. If I lose interest, then it's gone for me.
Yeah.
And so like that's the question: is what holds and maintains my interest to want to see the end of the storyline? And I guess I have to feel like it's not predictable, or it's not, I don't know what's happening, but that doesn't mean it has to have some weird twist. It just means like I need to constantly be convinced that you're making creative decisions that are clever, smart, or interesting.
Yeah, that is subjective in of itself, really.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very much a subjective thing, but I feel like that's the bar that game has to constantly keep passing for me. And then as soon as they don't, maybe I'll give them a second chance if they've had a good track record up until then. But if not, then that's probably the point where I'm done.
Yeah. At the very least, I want them to tie up as many loose ends as possible. Like, so it's all right to keep me wandering for a bit, but like the main threads, I want them to just then be tied up. It's one of the reasons why I finished Mirror's Edge, actually. I love Mirror's Edge. I absolutely love it. The art style's gorgeous. The music's fantastic. The mechanics are great. But the story is bog standard. It's a basic film noir murder mystery thing. Like you get framed for a murder and then you go find out who the real killer is. It's boring as can be. But I still finished it because I wanted to see the ending. I wanted to know how it all resolved.
Yeah, I guess it's a closure thing.
Yeah, it definitely is. I usually feel like I've got my money's worth when I finish the game story.
Did Mirror's Edge resolve in the way that you expected?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
But the last cinematic before the credits roll, that makes it all worth it. You zoom out on the character and then that wonderful main theme starts playing and the story is, for intents and purposes, finished. And I could just sort of breathe easily, get like, yes.
I'm with you, actually. Like, finishing the Phantom Pain, I haven't seen a credit scroll in years that I can remember. And it was, to get that experience again was actually really good. And I kind of see where you're coming from with that now, because you need the resolution that ties everything together. Yeah. And it was something that was missing, but I hadn't noticed that it was missing.
Right. Although it seems like the prevailing opinion online is that the Phantom Pain drops a lot of balls in terms of story.
Yeah, I could see that. But I don't know. I mean, they wrap it up the way they want to, I suppose, even if they don't kind of close all the holes and there are some hanging threads.
Does voice acting make it easier for you to get into the story itself?
I think voice acting makes it harder.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, for cutscenes, okay,
how come?
Cutscenes are better with voice acting, but the general walking around and talking to people, that just means I have to sit here for 30 seconds instead of 5 because I can read way faster than you can talk.
Okay, so you are of the whenever text pops up, Rem A like a madman school of thought.
I mean, I'm reading it. You know what I mean? I'm not just skipping by it and not letting it sink in. I'm engaging with that content and I'm absorbing it.
It's just too slow.
Yeah, it's just too slow. And I also don't like slow text scroll speed either.
Oh yeah, I remember Hatful Boyfriend. You did not.
Must you mention that game?
So voice acting I think is very good for cutscenes, but I really don't like it in the actual gameplay itself. And in the way that it takes longer and I get frustrated, it actually breaks me out of the story.
Really? Here's an example. I had a hard time. Well, I did finish those games because they're legitimately good games, but Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, They only have voice acting in the actual cutscenes, and the rest is all text. But that sort of took me out of the game because there's no emotion, there's no intent behind letters most of the time. It's just letters.
Yeah, it's disconnected.
Yeah, exactly. And I would like everything to be fully voiced because I love listening to voice acting. Like I love listening to people's voices. So to take that out of the game takes away a bit of the personality of the characters for me.
Yeah, actually that makes sense. Because with voice acting, you get a read on the intonation of the line.
Exactly.
They don't put anything in video games that just have a text box. They never say, like, with what tone they're saying these words.
Yeah.
It's always
exactly.
just words. So from that point, I guess I can see how you would get more information from listening to a voice actor relay the same line.
Yeah, it just gives the characters more depth. Something that you miss if it's just a text box. I mean, how often do you have a conversation with somebody online, on Facebook or Skype or whatever, and the other person is not really sure how you meant something, or you're not really sure how they meant something because there's no intonation there.
And they don't even add the little bit like you see in books, like he said angrily or anything like that. It's just words.
It's pretty much a text message.
I guess you are losing a lot of nuance there.
Yeah,
actually.
you are. It could make a story so much better if the voice actor doing the voices for one of the characters is a really good one as well. It just gives the character that much more depth.
I might have to take that suggestion and actually listen to some of that stuff instead of hearing like the first 3 words and then next thing.
No, just treat it as a podcast. I don't know. Just sit back and relax and try to get sucked into the game world.
I guess the frustrating part just comes from when that person's not going to say anything that important. It's like an NPC or something and you're forced to listen to them.
Then again, in real life, not everything that people say is always relevant to anything. So that's a bit of art imitating life, I guess.
Does the player choice aspect of things help you get more invested in a story, do you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I get to pick which way the story goes. It makes it easier than ever to become invested in a character and in a story when you are in control of that story.
I think Guild Wars 2, I actually noticed that what Chris is talking about kind of in action. At the beginning in the leveling process, you get a lot of control over what you're doing, or at least it feels like a lot of control over what you're doing, because you get to make all these decisions. NPCs come up and ask you these questions about what you want to do, and you make these decisions, and there's a drop-off in the story of that game where you kind of merge into the main storyline with everybody else, and that's when your decisions stop. You stop getting as many, and they stop mattering as much. And that's when I lost interest in the Guild Wars 2 storyline back, years ago when I was playing it, was because they pretty much take that away from you, and you're going from having this huge amount of control over the story to just going along for the ride, and it's kind of jarring, and I didn't think it was fulfilling at all.
Yeah, but the contrast is sort of bigger there, isn't it? Because you start off getting a lot of choice, after which you get a very linear experience. And it just makes the contrast more glaring.
Yeah, and it just made it less enjoyable,
I can see that.
Yeah, it was unfortunate.
I kind of prefer that. I think it's easier for me to get invested in a story that I'm being told. And I don't know if that's just because I've been conditioned not to interact with stories over my whole life. Or if like the choices I make are never nuanced enough or never go exactly the way that I would want them to. So I'd rather just be on like a ride for that. Like I'd rather just have it be a roller coaster without me having to choose which path to take.
Interesting. So, have you played The Walking Dead?
Yeah, I did.
Did you prefer that style over?
It was good. I mean, it was good, but I'd rather read the story. But at that point, it's like, why? Because the crucial point of that game is the choice, right?
You're you're watching a movie at that point if you remove the choice from that game.
But what they did, I think, that was really great that short circuits that part of my brain was putting the timer on a lot of those choices.
Yeah, that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas I will normally just sit there and look at that choice for however many minutes, like trying to roll through the possibility space in my head of what each one of these things means, they were like, figure it out in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So having some of that control taken away from me was actually like the middle point of giving me a choice, but also telling me a story, because I never stop. I never get paralyzed with that like indecision part of it.
I think Life is Strange did it very well because they allow you to rewind time so you can check out all the choices in any given menu. So you can choose the one that you're 100% behind. sort of circumvent that problem. So you'll always choose what you think is best. There's no way you're going to pick the quote unquote wrong choice.
That seems okay. That seems like a good way to handle it. That sounds like going back to like the old school RPG days with the quick save and quick load.
Yeah.
But actually built in as a mechanic of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And since it's like a story-driven experience, you're not coming out of it overpowered because all you ever made were the perfect choices.
Yeah.
A good game that gives you a lot of player choice has no good or bad answers. The Witcher 3 is a good example of that. There are no good or bad answers, and just different answers that lead to different conclusions. None of them are bad or good.
I think that's true. Yeah, I'd give you that overall. And I think I also like the trend of right now where those story decisions have impact much later down the line.
Yeah.
So
really
4 or 5
that.
hours later, you're not going to roll back and redo that decision.
Yeah.
So there's that stuff helps me a lot as far as getting invested in the storyline.
Yeah, that's great. That was great in The Witcher. You can't plan for any consequences because you're not really sure if something that you're doing now might have a consequence down the line. So you just choose what's best in the moment for you, as opposed to what's best for your progression.
And that's it. I mean, that disconnect is really important. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely going to be one of those subjective things, but I think that you can see a combination of little factors that when you all add them up, you get to a larger investment in a story.
Yeah. As long as the characters are strong and well developed and the voice acting is pretty good, then it's pretty easy for me to get invested in a story.
Okay, so this topic is a little bit controversial in the way that controversy is also controversial, and I want to talk about if we, or if gamers in general, take things too seriously. Is there an appropriate level of emotional investment in this hobby that we all enjoy?
Nope. I think all gamers are reasonable and they never get outraged over inane, inconsequential stuff. We're all a calm bunch of dudes, really.
Yeah, I agree.
That's great. You're living on a very different timeline than the one that I'm from.
No, gamers are the worst. I mean, I don't know. In my mind, I feel like it's not a fault if you take your gaming seriously, because we get really invested in our games, you know, and when you're really invested in something and somebody else comes and tries to ruin it, I think it's a normal reaction, and I think it's an appropriate reaction to be a little bit angry. But at the same time, I also think an angry reaction to somebody just doing bad in a game isn't warranted. You know, if someone's coming into your game and they're trolling and they're messing things up, I think it's fine for you to get kind of upset about it. Of course, there is a line. I think if someone's just doing bad, you have no right to get pissed off at them.
I get the feeling that a lot of people in online competitive gaming, they tend to go full Macintosh without any sort of encouragement needed. Sometimes in Heroes of the Storm, during the draft mode where you pick all your heroes and stuff, if one of the people in your team dares to pick a hero that is not 100% according to the meta, people instantly start saying like, GG noobs. People start to get angry. People start to give each other grief over the entire game. And I don't know, you're just taking it a bit too far then.
Well, I don't know. I kind of understand that kind of frustration, because imagine if you were playing a game of soccer and everybody picked their positions, and then you had everybody in their spots, and then one guy says, hey, I want to be goalie also. And so you now have two people in the goal. Don't the other people on your team have the right to be upset about that? Because that one guy is kind of ruining, he's putting his individual thing above everybody else's, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I think it's apples and oranges in this case, football and something like Heroes of the Storm. Well, both competitive games, yes, different in the way that they are set up. I've won games against a strong meta team that had a healer and a tank and all that thing, where when my team had no tanks or no healers. I mean, a bad hero can still be pretty good or above average if the player is very competent.
But that's later on though, like after it pans out.
Yeah, but you never know how a game is going to play out, because you're in a game with 10 people. Most of them you don't know, so you don't know how they play. You don't know how well they know their heroes. So to call a game before it actually has begun works very demoralizing for the other people in your team. And it's unneeded to already start your grief at the start of the game. You haven't even played a second of it.
I agree that it's unneeded, but when people do it, I don't get upset about it, because say you know, like in League or something, if you go without a mid laner, that's like, you're probably going to lose. If you don't send anybody mid lane and somebody wants to do two top or something and nobody mid, you're probably going to lose. And 9 times out of 10 you will. So I don't know. It is unneeded. That anger is unneeded, but I don't think it's outrageous if somebody gets mad. Because, I mean, if you can see something coming a mile off, you can see it coming a mile off. And if it works out, then it works out. But it's probably not going to work out.
I think the stakes are very high because you're looking at the difference between having a good time and not having a good time. And when your enjoyment is contingent upon the fact that somebody else does the competent thing,
yeah,
then like if they do the wrong thing, then your time has now been wasted and you're having a bad time where you thought you were going to have a good one. And that flip, I think, is what causes people to get frustrated. And they take it seriously in the same way that you want something to be good when you know it has the potential to be good.
That potential is pretty much always there. And especially in team-based stuff, you don't know how the rest of your team plays. They might be really good or they might be really bad. I mean, they might be picking all the right heroes, but have no idea how to work with it.
I think that they get, like you said, demoralized. Like the 2 times out of 10 that it does pan out for the good and it's like a surprising, oh, cool, that actually worked out. There's still the other 8 times out of 10 where it doesn't.
It doesn't make up
and
for it.
That's the people and the games that they've played. So if you put the same person in there in the last 10 games it did work out and those are the only 10 games he's played, that person isn't going to get frustrated. But as they play the game longer and they see these patterns emerge, like I think the frustration comes along with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of people, and that includes me sometimes, were too quick to jump to the conclusions without having been given sufficient data.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fair. But I also think that the more you play of these games, the more you see the patterns of sort of emerge, and you're taking it seriously in the way that it just depends on your personal level of investment. If you really want to win and you see that now the odds have shifted slightly because of somebody else's incompetent play, that's kind of a bummer.
Bummer, yes. That still doesn't mean that you can go full ham on somebody.
No, I mean, there is a limit of appropriate reaction, but I don't think it's inappropriate to get frustrated and voice that.
There's a difference there. There's a distinction that needs to be made. You can take something seriously, or like what we're talking about now, you can take stuff too seriously. And those people, I think, are not really all that constructive for online play. Or in general, it's not just inside of games. Sometimes people who are outside of games on forums take the games that they're talking about way too seriously. I mean, because of that, the Blizzard forums, for instance, they've got a reputation for being so incredibly toxic that newcomers are advised to not even go there.
Yeah, you can't lose sight of, perspective of the game. I mean, there's times where I play Rocket League and I'll lose a bunch in a row and I get really mad, I'm just getting really worked up and really frustrated. And then I think to myself, okay, I'm playing Rocket League. It's not even ranked. Like I gotta put this back into perspective and and think about what's actually going on. Because I think we lose sight of that. And that's where a lot of these problems arise from. I don't know if I want to make that statement, but I don't think anybody really goes into their first game pissed off, do they?
Well, some people do seem to have a hair trigger.
Yeah.
That's true. I think maybe as sort of a unifying thread, like to bring it up, because people also take the world outside of games too seriously. Like when the series they like goes in a different direction that they maybe don't approve of, or, all the stuff around pre-orders and stuff like that, although probably justified, some people still take it very seriously and get that level of outrage and anger. And I think it's got something to do with the ability of being heavily invested in something that you can't necessarily control the direction of.
Yeah, because you don't want to lose what you've invested in.
So you get that frustration, but then video games specifically also have an element of them where you have direct control. So control versus non-control, I think, tends to create a situation where, like, what do you do? Like, I'm really upset about this, but I can't do anything about it. And I wish this was different, but I can't change it. And normally, I guess, what do you do? Just acceptance, I guess, is the other side. Would you just take it? But when you have no recourse, you go online and find other people who feel the same way you do, who also have no recourse. And then together they the anger is this unifying factor. And maybe it's too seriously, maybe it's not seriously enough. I don't know. But I think that a lot of it, the negativity we associate with too serious, because there's also a good side of too serious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people who want a game to grow and become the best possible version of that game. But those people they tend to be pretty constructive. Helping developers figure out what to do by partaking in beta tests and stuff like that. And I get that.
Oh, yeah. Or you look at speedruns, right? Like speedruns, some people would look at that and be like, wow, those people take this game way too seriously. But it's like in a good way.
Yeah, that's a constructive way, I think. You are doing something constructive. You're doing something that's impressive.
Yeah, you're putting a level of effort.
And you're not trying to drag other people down. You're not saying like, oh, I can do this and you all can do this, which means you all suck.
And so nothing draws people together like shared anger, I guess. Is
Again, Blizzard forums.
like
Yes.
that negative factor is also such a unifying factor.
That's depressingly true. Kind of rocked me a little bit.
As a subculture, we tend to be pretty angry about a lot of things all the time. And I find that to be, like Ryan said, it's depressing.
Yeah, I don't know how much of that is a factor of just the echo chamber of the internet being around and how much of it is because, you know, if I'm angry and I see somebody else who's angry, like, yeah, let's be angry together. But like, how long on my own and to what level would I become angry if it was just me? I don't know.
I also feel like it's in games. I think it's a skill. Well, not only in games, but in considering everything, it's a skill to be able to deal with situations where you're not happy with what's going on. And especially with games, since it has such a young audience, I think there's a lot of gamers who just are of the age where they're not able to handle that kind of thing in the appropriate way. And I'm saying this, I'm only 23, and I feel like compared to 6 months ago, I handle stressful situations in a totally different way. And I don't think that's something you figure out until you're really, like you're an established adult. And so like for me, I still get worked up all the time. And I know when I was younger, I would get even more worked up. And I think since gaming is like, 40, 35 and under, for the most part, you're going to have a large group of your gamers who just aren't not by any fault of their own, but they're just not used to handling that kind of thing because they're so young. So I think that kind of skews the graph a little bit, I
think it's also worth mentioning that a lot of these people, it is a very loud minority. I do concede that, but it's a minority, like one or two of those will pop up every now and then and will make a ruckus. And you notice that. And they drag the rest of the people down with them.
I think as a note to that note, you have to add the fact that it's worked before. Like a giant community backlash of people who are taking things way too seriously, but serious enough that they get the thing changed that they were all upset about.
Well, yeah, but that's justified anger then, isn't it? That's not taking stuff way too seriously.
That's actually...
because it's not going your way.
That's probably the perfect amount.
So you just... eventually it just comes back around, like the way to justify your behavior is just to be right in the end.
It usually comes down to that, right? I mean, if you're right and people won't listen to you, and you get angry over that because you're right.
Yeah, that's kind of a shame, but also very true. But the fact that these examples have happened in the past, they have to add fuel to the fire, right? Because history has shown that this works.
But the times where it works is where it's reasonable, and the developers say, you know what, that you guys are right, we need to change this aspect of the game. But there's other times where people get real pissed off about something, and the developers say, you know what, we think we know what's best for the game, and you guys are just going to have to be angry.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Sometimes people seem to forget that the developers that made the game that they are playing right now are fully capable of making the game that you are playing right now.
That is true, but I just can't help but think that it's got to make those people a little bit hopeful that they'll be able to pull something like that off.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, that's why they do it. And sometimes it's correctly placed hope because it works.
Yeah, I think in general, it's hard to say whether something is too serious. Like, it's hard to put that label on it. Like, are you taking this too seriously? Because I think that it's just got to do with whether the behavior you associate with taking that very seriously is appropriate or not.
Are you not able to enjoy something anymore because you're just constantly angry about it, yet you're still playing it? I mean, that becomes a problem.
And so, I mean, like, I think that's where you say, okay, this is too serious. When, like, the level of seriousness starts to be associated with and have tacked on, like, negative behaviors, right? Like that. When
you hate something so much, you can't walk away from it.
Yeah, and you gotta put that in a relative scope, because, I mean, I'm MGE, so when I play Counter-Strike and I lose a few games, it's like I get pretty mad, but then I have to, like, take a step back and say, you know what, this is not my life. This is a game of Counter-Strike. But if I'm a pro and I'm losing games left and right, like, I think you're totally justified in getting mad because that's your livelihood. So it's like you gotta put it in that perspective of where that game sits in your priority list, I guess.
Yeah, you sort of have to look at what you're doing and think, like, am I enjoying this thing that I'm doing right now? If not, maybe I should walk away and do something else with my time that I do enjoy.
But it's got to be a conscious decision, because you're not going to subconsciously think, oh, maybe this isn't as important as I thought it was. Your brain isn't going to do that for you.
I want to state again here that I don't think that everybody who's angry is unjustified. Not at all. Because there's tons of situations where the backlash towards a developer or a publisher or whatever was fully justified. I'm just talking about the people that can't seem to let up, don't want to walk away from something that they obviously do not enjoy and haven't been enjoying for a very long time.
Yeah, I feel like that's another set of issues for them. I don't think it's about the game at that point. I think it's another, if you're playing a game that you used to like to the point where you're angry every time you play it, that's something else you got to figure out, Talk to your therapist about it or something, because the game's not going to fix it.
Not belittling anyone's problems here, by the way.
No, of course not. But
sometimes it's a bit too much. It's just a bit too much. And you should calm the fuck down, son. Don't let it get out of hand, basically, is what I'm saying. Make sure that the thing you're angry about is actually something worth getting angry over.
Do gamers take games too seriously? Sometimes.
Sometimes. And that's all right in some cases. But in other cases, it is not.
I don't know. I feel like when we get angry, this is myself included, and I'm pissed off at a game. I'm like real mad. And somebody asks me, is this really that important? Like, are you really getting that worked up about a game? And even when I'm in that moment, I'm still like, fuck yeah, I'm pissed off. Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, I was the worst. It's like you can't even assess it when you're in that moment, It's, you got to wait and really cool off before I don't know. It's just weird to me. I think it's really interesting how we get worked up over something we're volunteering to do, and we can leave at any point.
You have to be serious. I mean, success is equated with seriousness. It's just like as it creeps up, there's a level where that switch gets flipped, and all of a sudden it's too serious. And that line is different for everybody in every different game, and so you can't apply a blanket term and say all gamers take games too seriously.
Oh, when constructive turns into destructive, that is the point where you should have to stop and take a look at yourself, or what you're doing.
I think that's a fair measure.
Recently, Video Game Donkey, the YouTube channel, Donkey is a big creator of very popular League of Legends comedy videos, and he does other games as well, but he's really, really famous for his League of Legends videos. And he just got banned by Riot for, I think, a few weeks. He got a temp ban because of being abusive in games. And he released a video saying that he was no longer going to make League of Legends videos, and he explained why. And he showed some clips of the game, I guess, that he supposedly got banned for. And he was being pretty abusive to another guy on his team. Now, his justification for this is that the guy on his team was feeding. He was trolling really hard and just giving the other team kills and not helping out at all. So he's saying it was his right to get mad and I guess verbally abuse this guy because that guy forfeited his right to not be yelled at when he decided to ruin the game for everybody else. And Donkey,
bullshit.
Yeah, Donkey, I mean, he was saying that it's just trash talk. It's nothing harmful. Trash talk is the nature of games and that kind of thing. And I want to see what you guys think about, not necessarily the Donkey situation, but just trash talk in general in games, because I know there's a lot of people out there who think it's harmless, harmless banter that just goes back and forth, and it's a part of a lot of things in life, and that's the way it should stay. Or if trash talking games is that never cool? Should you never be kind of provocative or antagonistic to the enemy team?
Well, it's in the rules for a reason, and this plays into what we've just talked about, that some people take the game way too seriously. How do you think that they would respond if somebody was from the other team was just trash talking them? I mean, then you get a situation what happened with this YouTuber. He starts to harass him back, distracting all the other players, pretty much ruining the mood.
Mm-hmm.
It's against the end user license agreement, I guess, or against the rules to do stuff like that, because it's harassment. It's in the actual word itself. It's harassment. So don't do it, or you run the risk of being banned, like this guy was.
I guess it is very simply stated, like you heard when you were a kid: 2 wrongs don't make a right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Plus, this is kindergarten politics, isn't it? Like, he started it.
Yeah.
So does that mean that you have to do it as what?
I think that I found a quote a guy named Thorin from the Counter-Strike community did an AMA on Reddit, right? He wrote something that I thought was really appropriate to this discussion. It's a couple paragraphs, but I'm going to read it to you. And here we go. He said, I think he's talking about the term toxic. He says, I think that term is one of the most destructive and bullshit concepts ever introduced into competitive gaming. It's given a license to a generation of whiners who can label others as toxic, thus dehumanizing them and then allowing them to seemingly do anything they like to them. Why do you think so many people encounter what they consider toxic behavior and then themselves lash out and ruin a game for others in response? Because toxic is something other people are. So if you think they've been toxic to you, then they are toxic. And you as a non-toxic person, you're justified in doing anything you like to that person. I think it promotes a culture of blaming others and being unduly offended at almost anything you might encounter that you dislike. Last I checked, most online games come with a mute function, and tissues are both cheap and widely distributed in most developed Western countries.
I don't always agree with Thorin, but I wholeheartely agree with that.
Yeah, it's well said.
And yeah, in that case, I mean, I think the words of somebody else really put my feeling together on it, you know? Just, I mean, there is, number one, a mute function, so you don't have to hear their bullshit if you don't want to. And number two, like, that guy was feeding the other team, but the YouTuber guy was feeding the troll.
Yeah. What's that saying? Violence begets more violence? Or in this game, trolling begets more trolling?
I mean, I can't imagine the situation where he saw this guy messing up the game and then verbally lashed out at him, and then the guy said, oh, you know what? You're probably right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, that's never going to happen.
I really doubt that you can hurt that guy's feelings or impact him in any way. And yeah, I mean, by sort of engaging in the same behavior that was ruining your game, what are you really going to accomplish? And I understand he probably did it because he's got YouTube followers who all think that shit's hilarious, but it doesn't help anything. And it doesn't even, I mean, for entertainment value, okay, that's great, but entertaining or not, I'd rather see less negativity in the world in general.
Entertainment is, I can't remember if he explicitly said it or if it was kind of an undertone. I think it was more of an undertone that he was pretty much saying, I should be allowed to do this because I bring a lot of publicity to League of Legends. And then he further in the video said, Riot has never compensated me for any of the publicity I've brought to their game. And
they don't owe him anything.
See, yeah, I agree with that. It's like you started making these videos and you broke the rules and then you got punished for breaking the rules. You're not an exemption because you're famous, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's just a backdoor justification. I mean, I think he was just trying to find a reason to make his argument and state his case. It just happens that the one he chose doesn't hold water. Or what that would be indicative to me is that he's sort of always had that attitude, and then this situation just gave a voice to it.
Yeah.
That's probably always been in the back of his head. And since that was his internal monologue, that's what came out, like, when the shit hit the fan.
I mean, it's ludicrous what he said. They have never compensated me for bringing people to that game that I chose to play in the first place. What? Who do you think you are?
So, specifically, trash talk, right? It has a function. I mean, it is a tool. You can use it to put people on tilt, and then you can win the game. It's not a good one, and I mean, I personally don't enjoy it in the games I play because I don't think it's conducive to healthy competition. But, I mean, it is a thing that you can use. So, I don't know, man. It's tough to say in general because there's also a counter to that tool, like in the same way that every offensive tactic has a counter.
Yes.
And in this one, it's just the mute button.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so here's a little look into how I play games. I like to trash talk, but I don't like to be mean to people, but I like to banter with people. Like, you know, when you're playing Counter-Strike and you're in the warm-up round, I like to just banter with the other team back and forth. And nothing shuts me down faster than when nobody replies. And I'm like, okay, I guess no one's going to talk to me. Like, I guess I won't be a little jerk this round. But, I mean, like I said, I like to kind of antagonize people in the beginning, but I don't like to be mean when I do it. And if somebody really gets too mad, it kind of stops being fun because it's fun to go back and forth.
Well, there's also different forms. Like, you can call it being mean, but there's also just trash talk with like nothing constructive in there. Mm-hmm. Like, some people get really mad because maybe you should have done something that you didn't. At least that has a nugget of constructiveness in it. That's not just hate speech. Mm-hmm. And that might be because people are motivated by different things. People are motivated by both positive and negative motivations, you know? And it's possible that that person getting mad at you makes them play better, in which case that's great because you're going to win and you can just ignore them. Or it's a person who, like, if you were yelling at them the same way when they made a mistake, they wouldn't make that mistake again. So there's two sort of sides to it. There's a lot of different things that can come into play with what motivates people. It's just that people who are motivated by the stuff that's really negative and really like, why didn't you do that? Maybe don't sort of realize that they can't apply that same motivational tool to others.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds crazy, but I think it makes sense. I've played a Counter-Strike game with a really hateful dude and done like amazing for some reason. I don't know why, but for some reason like that made me get it right.
Yeah, I've had those games where, especially when someone on the other team starts saying things to me and it makes me mad, and then I start focusing really hard on the game and I end up doing better, but at the end of the game I'm still like, oh, I hate that guy.
See, it's weird, right?
Yeah.
I don't entirely understand that, but the thing is, like, looking at that from outside of it, it could just be like the worst, most negative experience in the world. But for some reason, like when you're inside it, like you're getting yelled at by a coach or something, you're either like, I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove this to you, and then like you like kind of play at a higher level.
Like sort of play harder just to spite the other person.
But see, that the thing is that even though that might look very negative, there's still that element of constructive criticism, right? Because by saying, why didn't you do this? They're saying you should do the opposite.
Are you saying this is coming from the other team or teammates?
Both teammates mostly. I can't really think of a situation where the other team would be able to tell me like that I messed up and then offer the appropriate play in that situation. They're generally just going to tell you how bad you are, which doesn't help anything.
I think intent makes all the difference here. If you're saying something with the intent to hurt somebody else, that's not constructive in any way, shape, or form. That is destructive. But if it's just banter, if somebody's just poking fun at something, like maybe you made a misplay, somebody noticed it, and then says something like, oh, you know, too bad, you shouldn't have done this, haha, something like that. That's totally fine. But you have to draw the line in between that.
There's a line when it becomes an attack.
Yeah, exactly. If they're attacking your person, if they like this is the most basal thing that I can think of right now. But if somebody drags your mother into this, people who play Call of Duty will probably sympathize with this. If somebody just drags your mother or any other family member into this, just to try and hurt you, just to try to goad you into a reaction so you can feed off that, I presume. How does that help anything? How is that conducive to anything?
There's no point in attacking things outside of the game because that's always going to piss somebody off, you know? If you make fun of somebody for missing an easy shot or something like that, they're probably going to take it a lot better than if you're just like, oh, you're an idiot, you know?
Yeah, keep it light, especially if you're in a team, you know? You are supposed to function as a team, and you don't really want to work with people who just call your mom a big fat whore for instance, right?
And I don't think anybody has ever made a game without a mute button in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is also true. It's your own choice to be subjected to this, yeah.
It's hard to press the mute button. I know it is for some. It's hard for me to press it. Maybe it's not for all people, but I know for a group of people out there, it's real hard to press it. But you gotta if someone's being ridiculous. Because nothing good is going to come out of that.
I offer that and I put that on the table, but I've also never pressed it myself. I've never muted somebody in an online game. I just listen to them. And I don't know why. Perhaps it's because like I'm never affected to a degree where I need to get away from it.
Yeah.
I'm always just like, okay, I can just ignore it. It's fine. It's just background noise.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing more and more lately. You do get quite a few angry, just angry people in Heroes of the Storm, but I talk to everyone and I'm trying to banter with other people, you know, have a bit of a conversation while you're playing, you know, maybe get to know them a little bit. And if it's a nice team, add them as a friend so you can play with them more. But if they start to harass you, if they start to curse at you for no apparent reason or just overreacting, I tend to either mute them or ignore them, and I always report them after. You know, Blizzard implemented this system that if you get reported, you get silenced. So they know that trash talk is not conducive to anything. They specifically put in a punishment that into the game that bars them from doing that one thing.
That's like a hard counter. Like you don't even have to be a calm, collected person to the point that trash talk won't put you on tilt. You have like a programmed in counter. You just hit the mute button.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's all they want to do. Like, they just want to put you on tilt. They're not actually mad at you as a person. They're trying to impact the way that you play the game. So don't let them do it. And if you're not going to let them do it, then it doesn't matter.
Easier said than done in some games, especially if it's somebody on your own team that's being a little kid, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of harder to ignore because you have to work with that person. So muting that person might remove him being a dickhead, but might also bar you from seeing him saying something that might help the team.
And that's a shame. That's a good point, and that's a shame because you don't even have to. It's not like trash talk only comes from one direction. Like the call also comes from inside the house. And so those are two vastly different situations, but it's kind of a shame that you would have to deal with it on your own team. But that you're right, that requires a very different set of tools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is why I'm happy that the whole silence mechanic is in there now. I mean, those people get punished, and their chance to be able to cooperate with other people in a team gets significantly smaller if they keep having that attitude.
With the whole donkey situation, I mean, if we're gonna come to a conclusion on that, also, I enjoy his videos. As well as, I mean, I enjoyed all the League videos, but I really think his justification for his, I guess, behavior and actions in the game, it's not there. I mean, because it's like you don't get a free pass because you make content for that company, I guess, for free, pretty much is basically what he's doing. You don't get a free pass to be you don't get a free pass to harass the users, no matter how bad they're being, because it's just not okay.
It's pretty easy. If somebody is being destructive, don't lower yourself to their level, because nothing good can come of that. And it doesn't matter if you have millions of viewers or just one. Never should you feel free to be a dick, ever.
Yeah, and I feel like with him, it was more of a anger towards the game getting boring, because he went into a really good critique of League of Legends outside of his angry opinion. He went into a really good critique of League of Legends, and to me, I was like, why can't you just say that and say you're not playing the game because you don't find it fun anymore, rather than coming up with this justification about being wronged by the devs for banning you.
He wanted to have his cake and eat it too,
yeah,
it seems.
Which, as history has told us, does not work.
Never a good idea.
Just because you have a problem with somebody else, don't make it your problem too, is a good way of going about it. It's okay to just look at that person and go, damn, dude, like, you kind of got a thing going on over there. It doesn't mean you have to have the same thing, and it's never going to make you come out ahead of them as much as just not participating.
Be the bigger person, trying to be accommodating to other people, trying to make it a good experience of everyone there. Even if somebody is being, for lack of a better term, toxic, don't let it get it better of you, because there's other people in that game too.
And that person is still a person. They're just making poor choices. I think it's important to remember that.
Yes.
All right, last week we played Borderlands 2 for our game club. That was a ton of fun. We actually got a session in all together, so that was really cool. And so you can check out that video right now on YouTube. It should be in an annotation on this podcast. And as for next week, Ryan, what do you want to play?
I want to play Trials Evolution Gold.
That's a great choice.
Fantastic choice.
I played Trials HD and I liked it a lot, so I'm excited to see what has changed in Evolution.
Yeah, there was a YouTuber named Mike B, and he did a really good series called Trials Evolution Tuesdays on YouTube, and I used to watch them every week. Every Tuesday I'd watch it, and they were just really, really funny. And the amount of maps in that game and the amount of creativity and complexity that go into them, it's ridiculous, and I'm really excited to play it.
It's also very, very frustrating.
Yes, because I get frustrated easy. I'm interested if I play more than 5 minutes, but I guess we'll see.
It's a good thing, because the frustration makes it, when you succeed, all the sweeter.
That is definitely true. Cool, man. Great choice.
Do I need to say anything here?
Well, yeah, thank you for listening, etc., etc.
Oh, should I roll that into this? That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, why not? I mean,
why the fuck not? All right.
Leave this in.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to episode 21 of the Select Characters podcast. We really do appreciate it. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on your local RSS feed, reddit.com/r.selectcharacters, Facebook and Twitter, and the YouTube channel, where we've got awesome content going up all the time. As always, thank you so much for listening. Oh, wait, we got a Metal Gear review up. So, check that out.
Yeah, go watch that.
It's on the YouTube right now. And of course, if anything that we just said was a bit too quick for you, all the links are also in the description down below.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Have a great week.
Have a great week. Bye.